What I want to look at is to go into the um, the beginnings of, and as much as we can, of the Egel Hazahav. One of the things that I saw yesterday when I was preparing is at the beginning of Lamed Bet, the beginning of chapter 32. So the Torah says, "Vayar ha'am ki voshesh Moshe la'redet min ha'ar," that so the people saw that Moshe was carried, was delayed, that Moshe was not coming as he said he would. And Rashi tells us that what had happened is that Moshe had said that it would take him 40 days up the mountain, and the thing is that he he meant 40 complete days, and a complete day is a day that starts from the night and finishes the next night. He was in the middle of the day, so that day wasn't included. It was in fact, it was just 6 hours, which is half a day, which is quite unbelievable. That's all it is. It was 6 hours. There was an impatience of the people that they weren't able to wait for Moshe Rabbeinu to come, and because of that, they created the Egel Azav, and that's really Rav Tzvi Yehuda Cook says that's the danger of thinking that we own the time that we have. That whilst part of being a free person, and that's the Pesach concept of shichrur, of freedom, that time is our own. It's not really our own. We sometimes in our lives we need to be a little bit more patient with allowing things to happen, to have a little bit more fortitude, and allowing and not to feel that we're in total control. The people felt that they were in control of the time. They weren't, and because they weren't, so therefore everything just went a little bit pear-shaped. So what happens is they see that he's not coming. They decide that they need to have some type of leader. It's fascinating that they didn't feel that Aaron was the one that could fulfill that role. I don't know the answer to that because I've been trying to think about why they didn't turn to Aaron and just play the role. Vayomer Elohim Aaron, they say to Aaron, okay, you want somebody to play this. You want to create something. Parku nizme hazahav asher boznei shechem. Take off the earrings that are on the ears of your wives, benechem, of your sons, venotechem, and of your daughters, veheviu elai, and bring them to me. And we know that Rashi says to us, Amar Aaron belibo, Aaron said in his heart, Hanashim vayeladim chasim letachshitayim. Said the women like their jewels, they like their jewelry. So they're not going to be so quick to give of their own stuff. Shema yitakeva davar. So then what will happen is it'll delay it. And in the middle of all this delay and there's all these arguments of that, they want to get the jewelry and they want everything to come from the women and the children. So in that all that time that's wasted, Moshe Rabbeinu will come. So what did they do? They didn't wait. They didn't even listen to that instruction. Aaron tells them to bring from the women and the children. They didn't even listen to that instruction, and so therefore that attempt by Aaron to delay the whole story it doesn't actually play itself out. And what happens? They all take their own earrings and they bring them to Aaron. Now it's fascinating because one would think that Aaron is the leader of this at this point in time, and you'd think that Aaron, as the leader, would say to the people, "Hold on a second. Those are not the jewels that I told you to go. If you want to create the thing that you want to create, I gave you an instruction." But he doesn't do that. He just he says that you should have brought the things that you that I told you to bring. He doesn't. They bring their own things. And what does he do? He takes them from their hands. And he puts them into some type of thing where it's going to melt it through, smelter. And then make it into an egel masecha. We'll try and understand what that means. Into an egel masecha. Rashi's it's this form of an egel of a calf. Vayomru, and then they say, Eile Elohecha Yisrael. This is Elohecha Yisrael. This is your God, Yisrael. Asher halucha me'Mitzrayim, that brought you out from Mitzrayim. Vayar Aaron vayibn mizbeach l'fanav. and Aaron sees what's going on. He's not really sure what to do. And his response is he builds a mizbeach, he builds an altar, he builds this place where they can bring offerings. Vayikra Aaron vayomer chag la'Adonai machar. He says there'll be a chag tomorrow. But to whom? To Hashem, not to the Egel. Chag laHashem machar. And then we know what happens. Vayashkimu macharat. They wake up in the morning. Vayalu olot vayagishu shlamim. What do? They start bringing all these different types of korbanot. Vayeshev ha'am le'echol v'shaso. What happens is they bring these korbanot, and then they sit to eat and they drink. Vayakumu letzachek, and they get up. Letzachek. We'll see what Rashi says. Explains that they engaged in all the different 3 cardinal sins. So let's try and understand what's going on here. How does it happen that Aaron, who is trying to prevent this thing happening, he's trying to stop them doing it at every point where he could have stopped them because he told them what to do, he doesn't do that. So he takes these things. So he throws them into this vessel in which all the gold is going to melt, and somehow it comes out as an egel masacha. Rashi says, "Kevin sheishlichu leor." So once they've thrown it into this thing, Ba'omach Shafei Erev Rav, the magicians of the Erev Rav come along. Shi'alu imahem miMitzrayim. Those are the magicians that came with them from Mitzrayim, and it's an amazing thing. These are the people that saw Yetziat Mitzrayim. They saw Kriyat Yamsuf. They saw all the incredible miracles that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has done. They saw the presence of Hashem on the mountain, but nonetheless, they're wanting to take control of this deity process. So they come along, and they make the egel out with what? With some type of this evil forces, kshafim, with magic, and that's how it becomes the egel hazahav. V'yesh omrim micha yasham sheyetzei mitoch demusei binyan. Okay, it says that there are other things that came out that allowed them to make into this egel. And what happens is, what is a maseicha? Rashi says maseicha is lashon davar acher. What happened is that they make this thing that looks like this egel. It is it's a mask. It's not real. It's not something that they can really attach themselves to. But nonetheless, these Erev Rav Kshafim turn to Bnei Israel and they say, Eile Elohechel Israel. And Rashi points out they didn't say Eile Eloheinu. It's not our God. And here we see that these people, that even though they had seen all the incredible miracles, that part of the concept of the Erev Rav problem is that the Erev Rav are the people that never really bought in to the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That these are the people that came against Aharon. These are the ones that made the Egel Hazav. Rashi says, "V'achar kach hit'u et Yisrael acharav," and then they also pulled Bnei Israel off with them. Now, what we see therefore is the insecurity of Bnei Israel. Even though they'd seen so many miracles, Bnei Israel still feel insecure, and they are easily convinced by the Erev Rav. Because when we look closely, you'll see that we don't see, at least on the surface, any single person stopping anybody. Nobody stops anybody from doing this. Aaron is terrified because he feels he doesn't have support. No one stops this whole thing happening. And while Aaron says, the Torah says, "Vayar Aaron shaya bo ruach chaim," Aaron saw that there was that this thing, this Egel Hazav, had some type of ruach chaim, had some type of life force within it. As it says, Shneimar, it says in Tinim, "Ketavnit shor ochel esev." It was like a shore. It was like a cow. Ochel esev was eating the grass. V'ra'ash yitzliach maaseh Satan. And Aaron saw that the Satan had succeeded, the evil, the negative, the thing against the Ribono Shel Olam and the relationship with him had succeeded. He couldn't stop them. He realized that there was a point that had occurred that, and it often happens, that we feel that there's point of no return. He had no longer any power to stop them. He had tried initially. He couldn't stop them any longer. So what does he do? He builds this Mizbeach and he says, Chag LaHashem Machar. And he's trying to use the language to convince Bnei Israel. Eile Elohecha Yisrael, this Egel, they said, is your God. And he says, Chag LaHashem Machar. That there is going to be a Chag, a celebration to Hashem Machar the next day. Why? Because he was hoping, at least Rashi says, Kipshutor, he was hoping that Moshe Rabbeinu would arrive. When Moshe Rabbeinu would arrive the next day, at that point in time, he would be able to undo the power of the Erev Rav, undo the power of the Satan, of this negative Yetzer Hara that had attacked the Jewish people in such a profound way. But we realize and we know that doesn't happen, because his fears, it's an amazing thing actually, and as I saw in a number of different commentaries, that our fears, if we play into our fears, then actually they manifest themselves. And that's exactly what happened. Aaron didn't know how to stop them. He was terrified, he was scared. Rightfully so is not the point, but he was terrified. And because he was terrified, he operated out of fear. And when operating out of fear, what happens is the exact thing that he was worried about, that they would then find a space of a new deity, is exactly the thing that manifested itself. And so that's really why Aaron is later on castigated by Moshe Rabbeinu. When Moshe Rabbeinu said to him, you should have stood up for what it was, that you know what was right, and not succumb to fears, because fears are the things that take us to the place we shouldn't be.